Namaskar and good morning to everyone. I welcome you all to the 19th session of the series of webinars on Mahabharata and Bhagavad-Gita, which are hosted by Department of Philosophy, University of Delhi, and Kamala Nehru College, University of Delhi. These webinars are being organized under the aegis of the SPARK project, which is the Scheme for Promotion of Academic and Research Collaboration, which is an initiative of Ministry of Human Resource and Development, now Ministry of Education, Government of India, with its coordinating partner as Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. The title of the project under which this series of webinars is being conducted is the Yoga Consciousness in Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita, an ethical value for societal and political well-being. We are working as a team for this project with Professor Bala Ganpati Devarakonda, the head at the Department of Philosophy, University of Delhi, as the Indian principal investigator for this project. Geeta Shnirban from Department of Philosophy, Kamala Nehru College, is the Indian co-investigator for the project, and that's me. Our international principal investigator and co-investigator are Professor Vishwa Adluri from Hunter College, City University of New York, USA, and Dr. Joydeep Bagchi from Germany, who's associated with Hindu University of America. Our extended team consists of Ms. Jayashri Jha, Ms. Anmol Preet Kaur, Ms. Megha Kapoor, and Deepshika Sharma. Out of these, 3 of them are working as researchers at University of Delhi, while one of them is our postgraduate student. As far as our project is concerned, it is our collaborative attempt to revisit the Indian epic to explore yoga consciousness as one of its underlying messages, while understanding how dharma as a result of yoga consciousness in Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita can well be interpreted for political and societal well-being. This project is a journey through the roadmap of yoga consciousness to delve deeper into ancient Indian wisdom for reviving the concepts of social responsibility and value embeddedness, as well as to search for answers to the questions of right action, thus portraying how yoga consciousness in form of equanimity and equality in Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita, how these emerge as ethical ideal. Well, these series of webinars are a humble attempt to make the various aspects of Mahabharata reach the diverse audience who hold interest in the study of the epic. We started the series of webinars during the extreme phase of lockdown to engage minds with Mahabharata. We've had the privilege of hosting scholars of repute from universities and organizations in India and abroad, wherein diverse topics related to Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita have been touched, ranging from social and political well-being, ethical dilemmas, justice, consciousness, karma yoga, instrumental violence, humaneness and punishment, environmental influences, dialogical consciousness, and many more topics pertaining to the epic, all as an attempt to explore Mahabharata for the human well-being. Well, today I am doing the introduction of the project, the ongoing series of webinars, as well as of our esteemed speaker, because Dr. Bala is not available. He will be joining us in between for a short period of time and then would be leaving. So I want to tell all our participants that we are very honored to have amongst us today Professor Sridhar, a renowned scholar, a registrar at SVYASA Yoga University, Bengaluru, who will deliver an address on myths and legends of the Mahabharata and overview. Well, myths, literature, philosophy, history, all crossroad within the realm of Mahabharata. Some scholars working on myths in Mahabharata, they call them as statements of reality, products of living faith, intimately connecting words and deeds. We all look forward to learning from the insights that Professor Sridhar will shed on the topic of great interest for many existing and forthcoming, upcoming scholars of Mahabharata. I now invite Professor Sridhar to take upon the stage, and we all look forward to learning from you. Over to Professor Sridhar.
Namaste to one and all. Let us commence with the wonderful words from the Mahabharata. Narayanam namaskritya naranchaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudiraye. On behalf of the SVYASA Yoga University, I extend my felicitations to each one of you from the Kamala Nehru Degree College, New Delhi, and also the participants from the Delhi University. Dr. Balaganapati Devarakonda, the professor of the Department of Philosophy of the Delhi University, and his staff. Also, Dr. Geetesh Nirbhanji from Kamala Nehru College and all her colleagues, and especially the people, the scholars, the young dynamic scholars associated with this Mahabharata project, and also the technical team involved with these things. I extend my very, very hearty congratulations and best wishes for undertaking this project and giving me an opportunity, a rare opportunity, to share some of my studies, which I did as a part of my doctoral studies almost 45 years ago. And thanks to Dr. Geetesh and to Dr. Balaganapati Devarakonda, I could revisit this Mahabharata again. It's not only my experience, but it is the experience of people all over the world that once they start studying the Mahabharata, initially in translations or in their vernaculars or through the original verses, they will be attracted towards it. They are so attracted that they cannot live it till, the last day of their life, because that is the attraction we have for this Mahabharata. What is the reason why this Mahabharata is so fascinating to people, cutting across the caste, culture, race, nation, gender barriers? The reason is, it is a great epic, a saga dealing with the origin, the evolution and decay of the lunar race called the Chandra Vamsha, which was present since time immemorial in this land. The main story, as all of us know, deals with the clash of the Kauravas and the Pandavas and the battle of wits between them, and ending up in a brotherly and a fratricidal war. It would not have been so fascinating if it were just a fratricidal war, but the main story takes under its current umpteen myths, legends, customs, practices, traditions, rituals, beliefs, rites of those times, and thus became a treatise of dharma in the abiding, in addition to being a work of art. The Mahabharata illustrates the Indian view that any work of art must be didactic in nature and not only just entertaining, because Mammata, the renowned rhetorician, has mentioned that the main purpose of a poetry is to give the wonderful advice in the manner of a wife or a beloved. Kanta sammitataya upadesha yuje. So the Mahabharata, that way, is appealing to each one of us. Apart from that, it is the earliest itihasa which is available to us. Of course, the Westerners have made comments and criticism against Indians, saying that Indians have a poor knowledge of history and they are incapable of recording the history of their country or their works as done in America, in all over the world. But the very word itihasa, suggests that it is a history by itself. Itihasa, it has three words. Iti, thus, asa, indeed, it was, ha, verily there. So itihasa means that it was indeed verily present or there. Means what? something might have happened. Whatever recorded in this Mahabharata should have happened elsewhere in India, certainly during some point of time. And the values given by the Vedas were extended the Vedas. And the concept of righteousness just was in her introductory remark, Dr. Geetesh was quoting that dharma is very important. Unfortunately, dharma is misconstrued in the present context, religious and political context. Dharma never means a religion. Dharma is that which sustains, that which nourishes. Dharana dharma ityahuhu dharmena vidutah prajaha. Tasma dharana sanyuktaha sadharma iti nischaya. This is what Bhishma declares to Yudhishthira in the Mahabharata. That which has the capacity to sustain, that which holds and sustains not only the individual, but the society, the family, the nation at large, and the world at large. That is the dharma, the righteousness. It should never be mistaken with religion, which is mata dharma. Hence, the former Rajya Sabha member and the Justice Dr. M. Ramajoy says that always dharma is a code of conduct. Religion is a mode of worship. So the dharma transcends all the religions of the world. There can be global dharma. There can be dharma in each religion, and it goes beyond any religion. So we should be very cautious while using this word dharma and mixing with any religion for that matter. So this dharma is emphasized in the entire Mahabharata through tales, parables, myths, legends, and so on. Because as the very word denotes, the Mahabharata is great in length and magnanimous in content. Mahatvat bharavatvacha Mahabharata mutyate. It is great in length and magnanimous in content. Why? It is, Monier Williams and Wintonis and other European scholars said that it is 15 times bigger than that of the Iliad and the Odyssey of Homer put together. The Iliad and the Odyssey, the great epics of the Europe, combined together forms only 15,000 verses. And 7 times bigger is our Mahabharata, 1 lakh plus 1,000 verses. It says, Eka Shata Sahasrantu. In fact, Vyasa declares, Eka Shata Sahasrantu Mayoktam Vai Vidibodhata. Please understand that I have written these words consisting of 100 to 1,000 verses. 1,000 lines, 2,000, 2 lakh lines and 1 lakh verses. So big, which Vyasa, who divided the integrated Vedas into 4 sections, Vyasa, who divided Vivyasa Veda and Vyasa, iti smrutaha, declares that Mahabharata deals with dharma, righteous conduct, or righteous value, artha, economic value, karma, emotional value, and moksha, spiritual value. All these are called the fourfold values of man's existence. And this is elaborated through the various myths and legends. Then what is the corresponding word for a myth and a legend in Sanskrit? Actually, myth means Purana. Pura Nava iti Puranam. Itihasa means a legend. Purana means a myth. Itihasa Puravrittam. This is what the Sanskrit lexicography of Amara Kosha says, Amara Simha. Itihasa Akhyayikopalabdhartha Puranam Panchalakshanam, it says. Means whatever happened, if it is elaborately mentioned and narrated in the form of a narrative, then it becomes an epic by itself. And thus that which is recorded becomes the history, and the story dealing with that of the gods and the goddesses, the demons on the one hand and with the people on the other, becomes the Purana. Means the lore or the myth. Then what is the definition of a Purana or a myth according to our Indian tradition? Sargascha pratisargascha vamsho manvantaranicha vamshanucharitam cheti Puranam panchalakshanam. Means it consists of sarga. Please let us not translate sarga as canto of Kalidasa's works or any word. Sarga here means the primary creation. Pratisarga means the secondary creation or the counter creation. Then Vamsha means the genealogy. Then Manvantara, the ruling of these kings, of the vassals, the dependent kings and so on. Then Vamshanucharita, the genealogy of the entire system of people. All this covered together is called the Purana. So, in those days, as told by Kautilya in his Arthashastra, the king used to study the Itihasa and the Purana during the afternoon, immediately after lunch. Itihasa Puranabhyam Vedam Samupa Brahmaye, it is said. Itihasa, the history, Purana, the myth, combined together, then only you can understand the Vedas, because most of the myths and the legends which we see in our Mahabharata has come from the Vedas, and percolated to the Ramayana and amplified in the Mahabharata. So, unless you study the Itihasa, the history, Purana, the myth, you cannot learn the Veda very well. So, therefore, it is said that sage Vedavyasa, who was the son of Satyavati, initially wrote the 18 Puranas. Later, having written the Puranas or the myths, he wrote the Mahabharata, called the Akhyana or the narrative. Ashtadasha Puranani Krutva Satyavati Sutaha Bharatakhyanam Akhilam Chakre Tad Upabrahmitam. Upabrahmanam, it is said. Means, initially Vedavyasa wrote the 18 Puranas called the myths, consisting of 4,32,000 verses. Then, having taken the cue from that, he wrote the elaborated Mahabharata with the main story of the Kauravas and the Pandavas, like what we have in the Panchatantra, the 5 main stories of the Panchatantra written by Vishnu Sharma. Under that comes the 69 sub-stories and the other stories. Along with this main frame of the story of the Kauravas and the Pandavas, he started writing the other stories, the sub-stories, the myths, the legends, the customs, the practices, the traditions, beliefs, rituals, and whatnot. So that way, Mahabharata speaks of the earliest Itihasa of India. So therefore it was called Bharata Panchamo Vedaha. It is the 5th Veda. Apart from the 4 Vedas, the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, Atharva Veda or Atharvana Veda, this was also called as the 5th Veda because it dealt with various dimensions as elaborated by Dr. Gita in her introduction as to what the compendium of the Mahabharata deals with. Only in a restricted sense, we say that it is a epic, but in a very broad sense, it is rather an encyclopedia by itself, as told by Vedavyasa himself. Yadi hasti tadanyatra yanne hasti natat koche. What is there in this epic is present elsewhere. What is not present here cannot be present elsewhere. So that is the crux and the sum and substance of the Mahabharata. It is said that Vedavyasa means what? Vyasa means an editor, as told by C.V. Vaidya, Chintamani Vaidya. We had so many Vyasas during the Mahabharata, rewriting of the Mahabharata, which is happening even now with your project. From the times of the original Vyasa, Vedavyasa, so many Vyasas are editors, went on adding and editing and including their folk tales, the regional, local traditions, customs, practices, tales, folk tales, parables, and so on. Initially, it was 8,800 verses. It was called Jaya. Then further, it became the Bharata Samhita, growing up to 24,000 verses with all the narratives such as the Dushyanta Shakuntala Upakhyana, Naradamayanti Upakhyana, Savitri Satyavan Upakhyana, Ramopakhyana, and so on. Then further it grew up and became gigantic and encyclopedic in nature, coming to the present 1 lakh verses. So that way, Mahabharata is an encyclopedia of knowledge. So here, generally, apart from the emphasis on dharma, which is explained time and again a number of times by sage Vedavyasa, that yato dharmaha tato jayaha, wherever there is dharma or righteousness, there is victory. Dharma labhat param nasyat tasmat dharmam chara uttamam. There is no superior thing than that of dharma or righteousness. And by practicing that righteousness, one can get the better things in this world and the world hereafter. It is mentioned 100,000 times. In fact, at the end of the Mahabharata, through the words of the great Bharata Savitri, he declares, Urdhvabahuhu viramyeshaha nachakaschit shrunoti me dharma dattascha kamascha kivartham tatna sevyate. I am holding aloft my shoulders and speaking at the top of my voice in the highest pitch. Why people are not hearing me? It is only under the broad work of dharma or righteousness, artha, the emotional value, artha, the economic value, and kama, the emotional value, can be fulfilled. Why people are not following dharma? This is what Vedavyasa said. And to emphasize these things, dharma, artha, kama, moksha, he took a number of myths and legends. Now we will get into that various types of myths and legends, and I will give you a bird's eye view and a holistic eye view in the short span of 45 minutes. So, what does the myth deal with? According to Indian tradition, myths deal with the fabulous accounts of the gods, the goddesses, and the demons. They are termed sacred and are generally associated with a ritual. So every myth has one or the other ritual. And what does our great anthropologists and the historians worldwide speak about these myths? According to Malinowski, myths can be cited as an authority on questions of religious belief and ritual procedure. And according to C.G. Jung, it represents the collective mentality of an age. And Joseph Campbell, one of the great thinkers, said that epic romance and tragedy springs from these myths, and it touches the deepest heart of our emotions and the heart, the desires of man, the fears and the hopes, the passions and the sentiments. Whereas for E.V. Taylor, who is represented the myths as the philological, means the languages and the allegorical interpretations in these myths. But our own wonderful anthropologist and history writer, Mircea Eliade, traced the ontological or the doctrine of the being roots in these myths. And for Wendy Doniger O'Flaherty of the University of Chicago, myth was a two-way mirror in which ritual and philosophy were regarded and combined together. So, these myths represents various dimensions. In the Indian context, the myths deal with the fighting and the titanic struggle of the gods, the goddesses, and the demons, and the gods and the goddesses against the tyrannical rulers on one side, and the fighting of the demons against the tyrannical rulers and others, only to uplift dharma or righteousness. So, whereas the legend speaks of the daring exploits of the emperors, the kings, and the vassals. The word legend was actually, the saga. It is also called as saga. In Sanskrit, it's called gatha or Veera Gatha. So this saga was the first time it was invented by Samuel Tent Coleridge in 1526 BCE, when he wrote the world-famous epic, the epic poem, The Saga of an Ancient Mariner. So he wrote there the saga. Like that, we have the saga of the Ulysses, the saga of his son Telemachus. Like that, the Greek, the Roman, the Hittite, and the Babylonian, the Egyptian myths endowed with so many sagas like what we have in the Mahabharata. So this myth which was nothing but an ancient lore or a mythology, whereas the legend was the history. So Yaska, who was our most ancient etymologist of the Vedic words, employs the word itihasa for the first time in his book on Nirukta, or the Vedic Etymology. In fact, as I told you, Chanakya in his Kautilya's Arthashastra elaborated upon that the king should read the Itihasa and the Purana to understand and to come out with these things. So that way, the king should be well versed. Of course, now the policymakers, you and I know very well, they should be well versed in Arthashastra, Indian economy and polity, Rajaniti Shastra, and old myths, Purana, then the narration, Akhyayika, parables or illustrative tales, Udaharana, then the code of law called Dharmashastra. These are very, very important. So what are the famous myths what we find in the Vedic period? We'll trace from there, are that of Indra, the god of rain, Agni, the god of fire, Varuna, the god of waters initially, later became that of the cosmic order or the moral order, Yama, the god of death. The major legends of the Vedas were that of Urvashi and Pururavas, the most fascinating love story of Urvashi and Pururavas, Indra and Ahalya, the wife of sage Gautama, Chavana and Agastya, the sages, the fledged legend of Manu, who is the progenitor of the human race, the story of the myth of the Shunashepa. And these myths and legends of the Vedas slowly percolated into the Puranic and the epic literature with some corruptions, additions, deletions over thousands of years. So what do we find? What are the types of myths we find in the Mahabharata? Mahabharata, as I told you, from now onwards, I use the short form Bharata. That is an epic consisting of 100,000 verses, and there we find the creation myth in the Adi Parva, chapters 60 to 69. Serpent myths, most fascinating, Adi Parva, chapter 20 to 35. The myth of the churning of the Milky Ocean, Samudra Mathana myth called, which is in Adi Parva, chapter 18 to 19. Myths of the two demon brothers, the Adi Parva, then chapter 206 to 211. Myth of the end of the Kali age, Vanaparva, in the chapter 187. Myths associated with the births of Skanda, son of Shiva and Parvati. That of Satyavati in Adi Parva, chapter 35 to 39. Shantanu, the story of Shantanu. The myth of Nahusha, a demon king, draw our attention. That's what I analyzed in my doctoral thesis, consisting of 12 myths and 24 legends I analyzed. So what are the legends we find in the Mahabharata? The legends appearing in the epic are the legends of King Pururavas and Urvashi in Adi Parva, chapter 75. Ahalya and Indra, legends concerning the river Saraswati, Adi Parva, chapter 38. Legendary tales of Chavana and Agastya, Dushyanta and Shakuntala, the most beautiful love story of Shakuntala and Dushyanta, and that of the Nala and Damayanti. I don't know why the Bollywood, the Hollywood, the Sandwood have not done the film on Nala Damayanti, which is the most fascinating, very attractive story which can be a popular film globally. Then that which comes in Vanaparva, chapter 46 to 77, of Savitri and Satyavan, which comes in Aranya Parva, chapter 292 to 298, and umpteen legends of several kings, queens, and sages depicting the rise and fall of their personal lives and that of the civilization, like the rise and fall of the Roman civilization. Then, what is the purpose of these Bharata studies, through which we learn the myths, and through the myths and the legends, what do we learn? So when you study the myths and the legends of the Mahabharata in original or through interpretations, what we learn is the mutation of thoughts occurring from the Vedic to the Puranic periods, and they reveal the socio-cultural religious changes experienced by our ancestors. We learn also that the myths are a relic of ancient customs, rituals, beliefs practiced by epic people. They are symbolic of a natural phenomena, codified in an allegorical manner, like the creation or like the flood. They represent the turbulence dance of basic human emotions: Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya, the six internal enemies for which both Pandavas and Kauravas became a prey. We also become a prey sometime. And by our end, that's how they became a victim of these basic human emotions as experienced by the ancients and by the heroic epic people under various contexts and predicaments. They guide us, they guide the mankind for leading a very wonderful, healthy, and ethical life. This ethics is very important, the normative ethics, which is elaborated in the Western philosophy, in the Western ethics. This normative ethics consisting of dharma and the various shades of dharma called satya and rita. Satya, the truth, rita, the cosmic order, are elaborated in the Mahabharata. The legends of the Mahabharata, comprising of several kings and queens such as Dushyanta Shakuntala, Savitri Satyavan, Nala Damayanti, speaks of the institution of marriage, Vivaha, which is very important, which is ultimate and supreme, as elaborated by Rajavada in his book, in his studies. Vivaha is one of the oldest institution in the world, which has been emphasized from the times of the Vedas. They give premonition, finally, they give premonition to people regarding the immoral ways of life and their dire consequences, reinforced by several illustrations and advice people for a very healthy, happy, and ethical life. And each of these myths and legends have a predominant idea. This is what I try to analyze. What are these motifs? They consist of several motives, we say. Motif means a predominant idea, a predominant thought, which runs as an undercurrent in the entire story or through the epic. So the recurrent motives are found in the Mahabharata are, and also in some of the Western literature I perceived and I studied as a part of my study, including the Greek, the Roman, the Babylonian, the Egyptian, the Gothic, the Hittite, the Inca Peru, the Japanese and the Chinese and other myths. I surveyed 12 myths of the world, civilizations of the world, ancient civilizations, while analyzing these Mahabharata, and I found striking similarities of these motifs in all these ancient civilizations of the world. Then which are these general motifs we find in the Mahabharata? Fertility, animism, symmetry and dissymmetry or asymmetry, concealment, revenge, filling and emptying. One can, Dr. Ditesh can think on writing an essay on filling and emptying, right? As a philosophy, as a tool of philosophy. Abandonment, transfer, dismemberment, metamorphosis, of course, not that of Kamu here, death and prophecy. Then the magical conflict and many more. The recurrent motifs found in the legends of the Mahabharata and in some ancient civilizations which I analyzed were expansions and immortality, upsurgence of basic human emotions, Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya, chastity, nudity taboo, for example, Pururava and Urvashi story, contest, recognition of a person among identical companions, Naladamayanti episode, diametrical opposition, and many more. So, while we see these things, what do we see? Why the question is, why should we study the epic, for any epic for that matter? A number of scholars all over the world have viewed as to why one should study a great epic. The old epics, the Greek epics, such as the Iliad and the Odyssey of Homer, the Aeneid of Virgil, or that of the Indian epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, or the Chinese. Why should we study? A lot of studies have gone in the last 300 years I'll give you a summary in about 5 minutes. The Indologists and anthropologists, such as Frederick Max Mueller, George Cox, John Fiske, Donald A. Mackenzie, Count Angelo D. Gubernatis, our own Oren Dandeker, and Uday Prakash Arora, argue that our ancestors of Indo-Europeans who had the original homeland in the Bok region of Russia, and they were a nomadic tribe and moved from one place to another, carrying with them the original folk tales, resulting in similar accounts of all the ancient civilizations of the world. The renowned Indologist John Hopkins opined that the Indian myths were reconstructed after the advent of the Greeks in India during 350 BC when Alexander the Great invaded India. He further argued that Greek gods and goddesses found their way into the Indian art, numismatics, architecture, etc. For example, John Hopkins cites the incidents of the fatal ring which occur in the Ramayana and the Shakuntala legend, the famous Shakuntala legend, and also the modified version of the Trojan horse of the Greek story in the Indian tale of Udayana, written later by Bhasa, as examples of intermixing of tales and culture from the East as well as the West. The contemporary philologists, while examining the multivarious languages of Asia, Europe, and other continents, floated a theory that the diverse languages are thought to have been originated from a common ancestral language called the Proto-Indo-European language, and hence parallel myths and legends could be found in ancient civilizations. In fact, contemporary archaeologist Colin Renfrew opines that the Proto-Indo-Europeans were settled in Anatolia, that is the modern Turkey, around 8 to 7 millennium BCE, and migrated to different parts of the world, disseminating with them the existing folk tales. David Frawley, George Feurenstein, and Subhash Kar say that we would like to, I quote, we would like to suggest that many Westerners today are able to enthusiastically respond to India's wisdom precisely because they carry in them the deep within themselves something of the archetypal symbolism that marks the Vedic or the Hindu spirituality. So that way, there is a connection between the myths and legends of India, of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana and the Vedas, with the ancient civilizations of the world. Then, what do we find in the myths and the legends of the Mahabharata, where I tried to give a holistic view, which I would like to summarize in the next 10 minutes. I hope I have time, Dr. Gitesh ji.
Yes, you have. Please go on.
Thank you. So, the myths and the legends, now we have understood the Itihasa and the Purana. What do we find? The holistic view. We find the creation myth, the Samudra Matana myth, churning of the Milky Ocean for 1000 millennia, the myth of the end of the Kali age, the myth of the Tripura Dahana, destroying the three worlds in the heaven by Ishvara and his son, his Kanda, represented the ancestors, our ancestors' natural quest and desire to have a clear explanation of their environment, the origin, the evolution, and annihilation of the universe, the functions and the interrelationships of the various limbs of Mother Nature, and also the animates and the inanimate objects of nature, the sun, moon, the stars, the phenomenon of rain, floods, drought, the epidemic diseases, thanks to COVID pandemic, the latest, which visits once in 100 years, you know. The Mahabharata myths incorporate India's most ancient thoughts and actions, maybe scientific, or it is left to the young scholars who have assembled here to deeply probe into it and to find out whether there was some scientific thoughts were there or not. Secondly, the myths of the Mahabharata serve as a teleological purpose of a traditional Indian. The myths deal with the first cause of the universe, as we see in our philosophy, the first cause, the efficient cause, the material cause, like that in the Nyaya Vaisheshika philosophy, isn't it? Or the Panchikara Prakriya of Shankaracharya in his Vedanta Advaita philosophy. We find the myths dealing with the first cause of the universe and the ways and the means to achieve them. Thus, these myths has a goal of salvation or deliverance, moksha, that could be attained by a person through a series of rites, vidhis, and duties, kartavya. Therefore, Justice M. Ramajoyas calls Mahabharata as Manava Kartavya Shastra, a treatise on the duties of the Mahabharata. Please read his book, the Mahabharata. He has written the book, The Three Values, where he has elaborated on these three things. Then, hence the myths were represented here in a symbolic way. As the Vedic commentators, like Yaska, Shakatayana and others, the Mahabharata style itself has an itihasa. Is a number of passages because, according to them, any legend relating to the gods is also called itihasa in Vedic literature, as referred to by Yaska in his Nirukta. So thus it serves the purpose of a history. It records the origin, the evolution and decay of the earliest race prevailing in those times, that is Chandra Vamsha, in the India, on the Indian soil. Then look at these beautiful legends, that of the Urvashi and Pururavas. Urvashi, the heavenly nymph, Pururavas, the great emperor, of the Ahalya, the wife of Gautama, sage Gautama, Rishya Shrunga, Dushyanta and Shakuntala, Nala and Damayanti, Savitri Satyava, provides an expression for the basic emotion of love and sublimity of love. This is very, very important. For example, the legend of Arundhati. Of course, I'll spend one more minute on this Damayanti episode. You know, Damayanti, all of you know the story, so I'm not going to tell you the story about the Damayanti. You know, this Nala Damayanti story is called Upakhyana, means a sub-narrative, which is a part of the great narrative called the Mahabharata, where the king of Nishadha, Nala, sees Damayanti through a portrait, and Damayanti see Nala through the description of the royal swan, and they fall in love with each other and finally get married and undergo several trials and tribulations. And it's a great saga by itself, when they, owing to the nefarious designs of destiny, they get separated, and Damayanti is brought back to her father's place, Bhima, in Kaundinapura, whereas Nala stays in Rutuparna's king and the foothills of the Himalaya, where, you know, Damayanti finally decides that she has to search for her husband, and and sends the Brahmins as messengers to the length and breadth of the country. You know, at that time, you know what she says? It's interesting to young scholars here. Vakyani mama gathabhihi gayamana dashodisha. This is what she says. Please go, O Brahmins, please go to all the 10 directions of the world and tell my narrative, tell my saga. Gatha in Sanskrit means a saga. Tell my saga. It comes in Aranya Parva Mahabharata, chapter 276, so verse number 27. So please go and tell this. It is the saga of Damayanti. It is the saga of Damayanti, like the saga of Sita, as told by Valmiki. Sita yas charitam mahat. This is the great conduct and the saga of Sita, not of Rama. It is that of Sita. So the trials, the tribulations of Nala, Damayanti, Sita are elaborated in there. So this fascinated the attention of Bob, our German Indologist, who translated into Latin way back in 1791. My dear young scholars who have assembled here, have traveled across America, Southeast Asian nations, India, England, and other places. Wherever I go, when I say I'm a student of Sanskrit, a sincere student of Sanskrit, the Westerners who have come to that conference or during discussions, you know what they say? Professor, please tell us the story of Damayanti once. Maybe, my dear friends, I might have told this story in 100 places all over the world. That is the beauty of Damayanti's story. So, in fact, Mahatma Gandhi, while writing in Young India, once wrote, the free India should have the ideals, I quote, the free India should have the ideals of Sita, Savitri, and Damayanti, and not of Amazons and prudes. So this is his statement. So that is the story of the most beautiful romantic story we find in that. Then that of the Savitri and the Satyama. So provides an expression of the basic emotions of love and the sublimity of love. The legend of Arundhati, the creation myths, the legend of Indra includes love between a man and a woman, between parents and their children, love of the human being by the Supreme Spirit, and the love of the man towards God. Finally, it encompasses the entire creation, both the animate and the inanimate. So the various myths which are found in the Mahabharata, in particular the Bhagavad-Gita, in general symbolizes an inward study. In fact, the whole of the Bhagavad-Gita, consisting of 600 verses, which comes in the Bhishma Parva, or the sixth section of the Mahabharata, from chapter 25 to 42, speaks of an inward psychological journey, total. And this is for self-realization or Atma Sakshatkara, and for obtaining detachment from the worldly attachment, as told by Shankara in his Bhajagovinda Stotram, Sassangatve Nissangatvam. Be in the midst of attachment, but get detached from all sorts of attachments. I enjoy the pleasures without attachment, like the water droplet on a lotus leaf. Padma Patramivambhasa. So this is elaborated in the Bhagavad Gita as an inward psychological study. So this paves us for the salvation. Hence it can be seen that all the myths and the legends in the epic have symbols, and they deal with the study of man in detail. While studying for my master's degree in English way back 3 decades ago, I was studying The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. There are so many symbols which can be compared with the Vedic and the Mahabharata symbolism. Some of you should take up that study anytime. So the various myths that have piled up around the figures of Indra, the god of rain and then the god of heaven, Vishnu, the sustainer, Krishna, who is the culture hero, Shiva, the devoluter, the Ganges, reveal the unlimited capacity of the divine and the semi-divine beings, and teach us the nobility of man, nobility and the greatness of man. The various fascinating accounts accumulated around these legendary figures, such as the Pandavas, the sage Agastya, Chavana, Arundhati, establish the extraordinary powers of man and woman, and the ways and means of attaining it through rights and duties. So the legends of Manu, Urvashi Pururavas, Agastya, various serpent myths which come there, myths of the Indra, the Agni, Varuna, and other tales, give us a mirror image of our own joys and arrow and sorrows, hopes and dismays, merits and demerits, and courage and fear and whatnot. I analyze that these myths and legends of the Mahabharata satisfy, as told by our Western psychologists, the three dimensions of our mind, the id, ego, and the superego. And aspects of our mind, that is a very important thing. So these myths and legends have paved the way for the development of second generation literature, fictional literature, and folk literature. So these myths and legends of the Mahabharata may denote some customs, rituals, beliefs, practices, rites prevailing in those times, which we need not practice now, because it is smriti, remembered, not to be practiced. Thus, it becomes an important document for studying the cultural anthropology of a nation. So, as I told you, I found a number of similarities between some of the myths and the legends of our Mahabharata, the Ramayana, with the other ancient civilizations of the world, such as the Greek, the Celtic, the Roman, the Hittite, the Babylonian, the Mesopotamian, the Egyptian, the Inca, Peru, the Chinese and the Japanese myths. Perhaps, as analyze, the same thinking worked behind these myths and these legends, myths, and folk tales belonging to other civilizations also. There might have been an exchange of idea or thought, who knows, through these folk tales and myths and legends between the origins of both East and the West in the remote past, resulting in a matchless and a peerless similarity between the corpus of Eastern and Western mythologies. And more important, as I analyze, the Indian myth makers might have created these several myths and legends to emphasize the eternal truth, Nitya Satyata, of truth in its highest sense is supreme creative, supreme reality itself, or the Parabrahman, and that of Ruta, or the cosmic order. When they visualize through either experience or introspection, antarjnana, or observation. Although the myths may be seemingly unreal, it does contain an inner reality or truth. Finally, the myths, the mythical and the legendary figures of the Mahabharata have adorned the palace, adorned a place in the pride of the temples, the bas-reliefs, the sculptures and the paintings of India. They have percolated into the vast body of Indian literature and have inspired many people from various walks of life for a better understanding of their own self, and living. So now we understand that the study of Mahabharata is very important from various dimensions. In total, the myths and the legends of the Mahabharata in particular, and the Indian mythology in general, drives an Indian to explore the frontiers of science, religion, history, philosophy, psychology, heroism, art, architecture, sex and love. It serves as a primordial and a lucid step in knowing the everlasting Mahabharata in a holistic way. To quote, this our Saraswati Samman awardee, Dr. S.L. Bhairappa, who wrote the Parva, that's called Parva, a great Mahabharata, again in Kannada language. Before writing that, he did research for 12 years and went across the length and breadth of India, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from Prabhasa in the west to Assam, Guwahati. And he met a number of people, interacted with them. You know what he says in his 12 years sojourn before writing the Parva, which is an extension of the Mahabharata in Kannada language. He says, I quote, "The fundamental trait of myth is that it occurs in the lives of people over and over again. Myth is not something that arises only out of the imagination of a few people, but sprouts from real incidents." So myths help us to understand ourselves, to connect with the past, like the internet connection, getting connectivity. So we should tell stories to our children, because Dandin, the Sanskrit rhetorician, said, "Kathayam sarasam vastu." Vastu, the plot of, should be full of sarasa, means lively, enthusiastic in nature, without the shorn of religion, without adding colors of any religion, we should tell stories to our children. For example, Katha Sarit Sagara, 10,000 stories are there. Bruhat Katha, 1 lakh stories. If you can tell one story to our child one day, every day it will last for 30 years. So the stories will help us to get connected, because the young children will pick up the good character and the nobility of those characters, and they try to emulate them and keep them as role models. So my guru Swami Ranganathanji always used to say, we have enough, we don't have enough role models in this country. We have enough ideals but not role models in the country. So we should build up role models among the younger generation. So as Devadatta Patnaik, a renowned historian and a mythological writer, says that we should get connected with our past. We should get connected. So Amish Patel ji also said that. So he he revisited the stories through his great bestsellers through the trilogy of Shiva, isn't it? So therein, he brought in these myths in a fascinating manner. Amish Tripathi ji. So this is very important, that mythology plays a great role in our life. I end up quoting Devadatta Patnaik, who says, myths have nothing to do with history. History is time-bound. Myth is timeless. History tells us how people lived in the past. Myth tells us how heroes and gods live all the time. So with this, I end up my lecture. I offer my grateful thanks to Dr. Balaganapati Devarakonda, the professor of the Department of Philosophy of the Delhi University, and to Kamala Nehru Degree College, Delhi, to Dr. Geetesh Nirban and all her colleagues for giving me a rare opportunity to share some of my views on the Mahabharata, on the myths and the legends of the Mahabharata. I profusely thank some of my colleagues are here from our SVYASA University, apart from your colleagues. And we have wonderful scholars, Dr. like Sumitra, Dr. Samatha, who is doing a wonderful, painstaking research on Yoga Vasistha we are doing together. And to all the young dynamic scholars who are here, we transfer this light of Bharata, the torch of Bharata to you people, so that you move forward. And I remember, last but not the least, the statement of Matthew Arnold. An experience of an epic poem is the experience of a lifetime. That is my experience for the last 3 decades. Namaskar, Dhanyavad, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sridhar. It's like you've also, through your lecture, made us experience the experience of lifetime reading of Mahabharata. Well, you capsuled the whole idea of myths and legends in 45 minutes precise, with insights so deep and philosophically intriguing, while explicating how these myths have been the two-way mirror through which philosophy and ritual in Mahabharata can be understood. Very beautifully and distinctly, you pointed out the myths and legends as found in various parvans of Mahabharata. A message that myths have a teleological significance. They are the relics of ancient culture of Bharat through Mahabharata. This is what Professor Sridhar shared, which gives us actually innumerable ideas to explore and study the epic with newer vision. While the myths and the legends, as he explained, as mirrors of joy and sorrow, as 3 dimensions of mind, as id, ego, and superego, has been a novel learning for us. How they are symbols of nitya satyata, and as source of connection between the past and the present. Thank you, Professor Sridhar, for actually sharing your thoughts on position of women, which is in itself so interesting and something that quite a lot of our scholars are consistently working upon.
Very good.
Thank you for delivering an address on a comprehensive topic that has been a real academic delight for all of us today. In fact, you have spared time for us on the day of festivity, giving us the ideas to celebrate Mahabharata through its myths and
Thank you.
legends. How beautiful. Uh, and we've chosen today as a day for your lecture, which in itself speaks volumes of what we had in mind and what probably the environment wanted us to do. And herein, I would like to share with all our participants that I think I was so mesmerized reading Professor Sridhar's CV that I completely forgot to introduce
not
him
required.
formally in the beginning. But I would take this opportunity in my vote of thanks to speak about you, sir, so that our younger participants get to know about your work, an intensive work, intellectually stimulating work. So please allow me to introduce you formally at the end. And that's what they say when the legends are on the stage, or in the stage or on the stage, newer things happen. So we are reversing the order. I'm now introducing you at the end in a formal way. So
not required, Dr. Geeta Ribhanji. You can give the link, they will read by themselves.
So I would like to share it as a part of our protocol. So all of us have had the good fortune of listening to Professor Sridhar, who's currently a registrar at SVYASA Yoga University, Bengaluru. He was formerly the Dean of Academics, as well as Dean Divisions of Yoga and Humanities and Yoga and Spirituality. SVYASA deemed to be university. He was the Registrar and Deputy Director, Publication Wing of Karnataka Sanskrit University too. He was a Fulbright Scholar in 2000 in South Carolina University, USA, and adjunct professor of Sanskrit at Union University, Cincinnati, USA. He has presented papers in 45 international conferences in USA, UK, Europe, and Southeast Asia. 45 at national and state conferences, and has participated in panel discussions on ancient thoughts and modern contemporary issues. Professor Sridhar has given invited lectures at Harvard University, universities at Berkeley, Stony Brook, Oxford University, and several universities in India. And here we saw him today on our platform too. He has guided 8 Indian candidates for their PhD. His publication comprised of 27 books, 2 monographs, 20 research articles in national, international peer-reviewed volumes. Professor Sridhar was Assistant Editor International of Encyclopedia of Hinduism, USA and India. He was a UGC Research Fellow 1996 to 1998. He's a member of NAC peer team. He's a recipient of 4 international, 3 national, and 5 state awards. He has documented seminar proceedings of UNDP on population, environment, and gender issues. And through his talk today, we did get to know how extensively he must have worked on gender issues too. Professor Sridhar has produced several documentaries on Sanskrit course, Indian philosophy, online environment, Indology, and Yoga University. What an honor it has been to have you amongst us on the Spark webinar platform. On behalf of Professor Balaganapati Devarakonda, I am not sure whether he's there right now. He will be joining us for sure in our next series. Department of Philosophy, University of Delhi, Kamala Nehru College, University of Delhi, and all our participants, as well as the extended team. Professor Sridhar, I thank you on behalf of all of them for being with us today, sharing your thoughts, ideas, as well as giving us newer insights to work upon in coming researches. Thanks a lot, and I take this opportunity to even thank our participants who are consistently with us every Saturday, starting from the first week of June. What a pride it is, and this is what becomes the real source of encouragement for us to go ahead and keep organizing a webinar on every Saturday. I request all of you to switch on your videos so that we can have quick screenshots for uploading on our social media handles, as well as for our records. So here I am on the page 1. Okay. There we go. Page 2. I request the participants to switch on the videos just for a moment. Back to page 1. Thank you all, and thank you, Professor Sridhar.
Lectures. Namaste, dhanyavad.
Thank you. I
We'll
wish
meet
you
again.
all have a wonderful
Thank you.
time of festivity
Wonderful
for the coming few.
Navratri
Thank you.
celebrations. Thank you.